brought companies through 9/11 and came out the other side much stronger and better through the financial crisis. So this is familiar territory for me. And then for the book, which you see there, I spent 6 years working with 36 of the world's top neuroscientists to find out how the brain works. So we're going to do a little bit of neuroscience. We're going to do some strategy about what's happening now. And then I'll share the way that I'm looking at sort of the COVID world. If we get too deep in neuroscience, I'm going to give you guys a nerd alert. So I'll let you know when we're going to talk about a little bit of neuroscience. If you want to just, kind of tune out for then, that's okay with me. But first, before we get too much into it, I wanted to ask a neuroscience question. So we're going to take a quick poll. What I'd like everyone to do is if Caroline or Zena could put up the first polling question. Here's a question for you that's a little bit of neuroscience. There we go. So now this is to rate your ability to multitask. And while everyone's filling that in, Zena, I'll ask you first. Where would you rate your ability to multitask on those three choices?
Oh, I'm a genius.
There you go. Okay, Caroline, can we see the results from people? And then I'm going to give away one of my little secrets.
We can, absolutely. So we're just going to end the poll and we're going to share our results.
Okay, so you guys you think you're about in the middle. You can walk and chew gum at the same time. So that's a fairly typical response. Now here's the bad news for everyone that said you're a juggling genius. There is no such thing as multitasking. So there's a brilliant neuroscientist who's a good friend of mine at MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology here in Boston. And his name's Earl Miller. And what he discovered was it takes literally a second. We have something in the smart part of our brain, the prefrontal cortex, called the working memory. And the working memory is kind of like the RAM drive on your computer, or it's more like your screen on your cell phone. You can only have one app up at a time in the working memory. And so what happens when you listen to me and then check your email, for instance, this app stops. You have to switch the next app back in this case, the email, and that takes just about a second. And in addition to taking a second, you have to rewind a little bit so your brain can make sense of where it is. So the notion of multitasking is really what he refers to it is multi-switching, because you're switching back and forth. So if you want to get the best out of anything, like this webinar, for instance, then you should try and plan focus time for each one of your activities. So if you're doing sales calls, if you're doing a webinar, if you're doing anything like that, try and plan out a time where you can just segregate 40 minutes or 45 minutes. That's about the extent that we can really stay focused and just focus on one thing. So unfortunately, if you pick number one or number two, you're wrong, and you lose that first one. But we've got plenty more questions. So stay focused as we go through this, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Making a mistake, you gather so much information from that. And I think, if we go back to what I was talking about in terms of where the industry is right now, if we're going to change our decision making, and let's say, just to shortcut some of these things, we'll use the OODA loop, and we're going to make opportunity-based decisions. If we change how we work, then we're going to look at everything from employee health to communication to work hours. If we look at engaging our customer, we might be switching from creating a product and delivering it to a customer to now becoming customer-centric, which is really scary because it might mean you have to change to doing things on demand and to creating new ideas. And then serving the community is self-explanatory, but a lot of people have fear about that too, because they say, if I spend time doing this, it's less time for my business. But you can tie all of this together. And Zena, I'm not sure if you're doing this from a corporate perspective, but going into what I see is the new normal and moving to this success phase over here in the way the next normal is going to be. I think we have to come up with ways that we haven't even thought about before. Part of that is going to be bringing in a lot more information than you had. But this is, from my perspective, a huge opportunity for travel planners, right? Because now you've got the ability, if you make yourself customer centric, if you bring in a dashboard with all the critical information, it's not going to be what it used to be, right? So now everyone like me, I want to travel. I'm going to France in July. You know, I've got my kids want to travel. I've got friends who want to travel, but we don't know what different government policies are. We don't know what different borders are doing. We don't know where the trends are in pandemic and response. So if you guys had a dashboard with all this information that nobody else has, now all of a sudden your value as travel planners go from someone who just knows the best hotels and the cheapest airfares to being someone I can really trust, because there's so much uncertainty. So to your clients, this uncertainty is a bad thing. To you guys, it's a huge opportunity.
And Sherry McCrae from class of 2005, you are our lucky winner. So please shoot me your address. I'll drop my email in there and we'll get a copy of that book out to you this week sometime. But